Open Interpreter is quite amazing. In this video, you're going to learn how to use Open Interpreter, how to install it, how to troubleshoot the errors, how to use it with the local model, how to use it with any local model, and how to use it for certain use cases. Not everything is roses and success. I'm going to show you a lot of errors as well. So if you want to see all those errors, get started with this video. Let's start with installing Open Interpreter. It's as simple as pip install Open Interpreter. If you have a Python 3 version, then do pip 3 install Open Interpreter. Once the installation is done, open your Python 3. The most important thing is Open Interpreter will not work with Python less than 3.10. So you need to have more than 3.10. And after you install, open your Python and do import interpreter just to make sure that it has been successfully installed. As you have noticed, when you install the library, you're going to call it as Open Interpreter, but while you're importing it, you're going to just simply call it as Interpreter. Then you have to set the API key, and after you set the API key, even to set the API key, you have different ways. One is what we just saw. The second one is you can open interpreter as a CLI, and then it will say that OpenAI API key is not found, and then you can set the API key. Or the other option is, the best option is, you can export OpenAI API key as an environment variable. Just make sure to do that so that in every session you have got it set. Once you set this up, by default the model is configured to work with GPT-4, and if your API key does not work with GPT-4, then immediately you will get an error saying that your API key does not have access to GPT-4. That's something that you need to keep in mind. Like this, it says invalid request error, GPT-4 does not exist, or you don't have access. So when you get this error, keep in mind that you don't have access to GPT-4. Now you need to fall back to a smaller model or GPT 3.5 Turbo. And there are two ways for you to use GPT 3.5 Turbo with interpreter. One is to use the argument -- fast. That will help you set the model to GPT 3.5 Turbo, or you can set manually in Python, which we'll see later. Once you have set the model with GPT 3.5 Turbo, you can go ahead and ask question. For example, count the size of the directory. It's a terrible question, to be honest. One, I said count. Second, I said size. But anyways, it gave the command. If you want it to be run, you can say yes. If you don't want it to be run, you can say n, and it wouldn't run the command. Second is, I'm asking what is the current system time. It created a Python code and it is asking me to run it. And when I said run it, it managed to get the right time. And as you can see, the time was correct, and it managed to find this perfectly by running the Python code to find the time in itself. Next, let's try to do a task with external file involved. So I'm asking, can you add subtitle to this video? And I'm dragging and dropping the video from my Finder. So if you have got like a Windows Explorer, then it says that it can do it, and it describes the steps. Like you have to install MoviePy, it has to write a Python script and then execute the Python script. When it asked me to run the code, then this is where it gets a little tricky. I said no in this particular case, but I wanted it to know that I'm running Python 3 on Mac, which is tied with pip 3. I'm trying to inform the same, saying that pip 3, then I'm using Python 3, and it goes ahead and it understands that do you want to install it with pip 3. The only catch here is that it didn't understand that it should not be with the bang, so it didn't go through. But anyways, it managed to understand what I said. Next, can you help me install some Node packages and also write your first Node application or Node.js app and then run it? And it again goes on and then give me the description about how to do it. So it gives me the steps like 1, 2, 3 plan, and it asks me if I want to go ahead and then do it. So again, I like the way it plans it out. It gives the list of things that we can do it. And the next thing that I'm asking it is, can you open a website and go to amazon.in and then take a screenshot? It manages to do it. In fact, it writes the JavaScript code which can actually go to a particular page and take the screenshot. The only thing in this case is the code did not work because I didn't have the package Puppeteer installed it. Once again, if you see all the last 3 examples, one thing that you would have noticed is dependencies are an issue. So you need to keep in mind how to handle dependencies, because if you do not handle dependencies well, if your Python version or if your terminal is not connected well, then you might not find it really useful. Everything has to be set properly in place for this to particularly work. That means like your Python should be there, your Node.js should have like properly set up with path installed. So just keep that in mind. So now we're going to learn how to access interpreter within Python. All you have to do is open Python, import interpreter, and once you import interpreter, because we have already set the API key, all you have to do is interpreter.model is equal to whatever the model that you want. In this case, GPT 3.5 Turbo. And then you can start invoking the chat. So you can start adding things here. So you can have a conversation with this. Part of the conversation, I'm going to ask the same question. Can you add subtitle to this video? and I'm dragging and dropping the same video in here, and I'm just closing this and asking it to do that. It does a pretty decent job of explaining the steps, and it also manages to ask you whether you should run the code or not. Now we are going to run interpreter with the ability for it to execute code automatically with the argument -y. So dash fast is to invoke with OpenAI's 3.5 GPT 3.5 Turbo, and -y is to automatically run the code. So it's not going to ask us any permission. Before you do that, make sure that your computer does not have anything sensitive. Now I asked, can you access like weather, like can you give me weather, and it managed to write the code. Only thing is it didn't have the right API with this. So if you had some open API or free API which does not require API key, this code would have ideally worked for it to give you. So once again, just keep in mind in this case, like if you invoke interpreter with -y, it's not going to ask you permission. So interpreter --fast -y will automatically run the code without you having to explicitly giving permission. Now I'm asking it to give me top 10 cricket news, and it asked me which API or website I should refer to. I just said like get it from Google News. I didn't even know that Google News has an API or something. And in fact, it manages to find something from that. The only thing I felt is when it ran the code, it kind of, I guess like it didn't work completely fine, because the way, the way it works is it has given the summary, but this summary is definitely something random. Like it's not the latest one. I know for sure, because it's talking about 2021. Either the problem is with the Google News API, or it didn't do a good job in this case. The point here is that if you have an API, it will definitely work. The next thing that I want to see is, can it take a screenshot? Like I wanted to do browser emulation. So I said, like, okay, go to the website amazon.in by opening Chrome and then try to take a screenshot. It writes a code for this. I think this is Mac automation code. I was quite impressed with this. It manages to go to Chrome and it manages to open amazon.in. And this was again, like honestly, like something that I did not expect, that it has quite an impressive piece of access, that it can go to Chrome and then do all those things. So now I'm asking it to, do another thing where again, I'm going to give a CSV and I'm asking it to plot a chart. And until now, as you know, that we are still using GPT 3.5 Turbo. So I've just given plot a chart and I'm going to give the CSV to it. I've given the CSV. Now it is going to go ahead and then start plotting. And as usual, at this point, you would have guessed that it is going to give you certain steps, then code, and then it is going to execute it by itself, because we have said -y. And once it starts executing, you can see that it managed to successfully read the CSV. It is giving me sample part of the CSV, like top 3 or top 5 rows. It's mostly like head 5. And then it writes the code to plot it, and only then it figures out that I don't have matplotlib installed. Once again, like I said at the start, dependencies should be sorted out. Like you need to make sure that you sort out the dependencies, or at least you need to make sure that it is easier for Open Interpreter to install any libraries. So sort out all the environment issues. I think it will be quite fine for you to do it. The next thing that I'm trying to do is, I'm trying to once again asking it to do certain things. Like for example, I'm uploading an image and I'm asking it to upload, not an upload. I'm asking it to add caption. Pillow is not available as a library, so it didn't manage to do it. I was curious to see if it would try with Python or something else, but again, it tried to do it with Python Pillow, which is PIL's Python 3 version. And I said install it. I'm using pip3, and in this particular case it did not use the bang, and it managed to install it successfully. So it did a good job, I would say, like installing the library, finding out that it is already being installed. The biggest problem that I have with using GPT 3.5 Turbo is a rate limit. It is a big problem. If you happen to use OpenAI API with GPT 3.5 Turbo, always remember that there is going to be a rate limit and you cannot bypass the rate limit. So the next one, that is exactly why we are going to move ahead from GPT 3.5 Turbo to a different universe. Now we're going to learn how to start using the local models with interpreter, Open Interpreter, and we're going to see a couple of different ways to do that. Let's get started. Using local interpreter or setting it up with Open Interpreter with local files, local models. I called it local interpreter, don't know why. It's quite easy. All you have to do is use the argument --local when you're invoking it as a CLI. Then it will default use code llama, and it will ask you which parameter count it should use. The 7 billion, 13 billion, 34 billion. Then once you select the right one, then it is going to say which model, small model, medium model, large model. Then once you say that, it would find out that whether you have GPU or not. It would ask you, do you want to use GPU, because that is helping you in GPU offloading. Then it will say the model is not available, and it is going to start downloading the model in itself. Once it has managed to download the model, you can see that it will try to install Llama CPP, and by default it was failing for me, at least like when I was recording on 11th September. So I went ahead and then separately installed Llama CPP, and I went back and then ran the same thing again. So make sure that you install llama cpp before you do this. Llama cpp python, that is a Python library name. So if you install llama cpp python separately before you even try the local model, that will be much better than trying this like the way I did it. So once you have successfully installed llama cpp python, go ahead once again, then say interpreter, then dash dash local. So all you have to do is interpreter dash dash local, and once you do that, it is going to go through the same steps. It's going to say 7 billion, 13 billion, 34 billion. Select the right one, select the size, then select whether GPU or no. Then as you can see, it sets the model to the block code llama 7 billion instruct GGUEF. So it has managed to successfully set the local model. Right now you don't need internet, you don't need OpenAI, there is no rate limit. But the only thing is it is not as good as GPT-4. I mean, that is the only catch here. But again, I would strongly suggest that if you figure out to work with this, if you figure out, for example, I asked the question, count the number of files in my folder, and it kind of tries to do it. Like it has like a cold start time. It takes a little bit of time to start with, but once you start, as you can see, the number of tokens per second is quite decent. And in this case, it gave me pwd, which is like for the current working directory. I don't say that this is the right answer, but again, like the next ones were probably better. Like I would say, like I said, count the number of files in my folder. The same question, it asked me, should I run the code? I said yes, run the code, and it gives me the right one, and it managed to give me the right answer in itself. So again, the point here is that you may not get as good as a response like GPT-4, but if you know how to give the right prompt, for example, I give the exact same prompt that I gave it to GPT 3.5. Can you tell me the current system time? And it did not. It comes up with like a weird command saying date. Maybe it didn't understand that I am on bash, or maybe it didn't do something. So, but again, it didn't work in this case. So I think the extra information that you give as part of the prompt would always help you, and having more context will help you. The only funny thing I found here is, like, for example, it gives me some random weird time, and then it goes on completing the text. It says, yes, that's correct. The current system time is December 25th, 2022, which is not the case. This again proves why you need a better model. But again, you don't always need a model that is code llama. If you have, like, for example, your own fine-tuned model, you can still use it. You can in fact pick any GGUF model. Like, you cannot pick any model. The model has to be GGUF. It's one of the quantization format. Go to the blog, search for GGUF. I just keep on missing it. It's like a tongue twister. GGUF, and then try to find the model that you like, or maybe something that you have quantized it. For example, something could be perfectly fine for shell commands. You can use that model. For example, in this case, I'm trying to use the stable Beluga 7 billion parameter model. Again, we are using the quantized model, and as you can see that it has successfully managed to set the model. So it says like we are going to use this model for quantized local execution. Same set of questions, small, whether you want to use GPU or not. Then it goes on and downloads the model. It takes a bit of time because it has to download about 3 gigs, and once it does, you can see that it manages to say that the model is set to the block stable Beluga 7 billion GGUF model. And then I'm asking the same question, can you count the number of files in my current folder? And I'm trying to provide extra context saying that I'm on bash. And now at this point, once again, you would notice that it has a little bit of like cold start problem, or the initial starting time. It takes time to start, but once it starts, the number of tokens per second is quite decent. So if you want to escape the world of OpenAI, probably this is an option. So it gave me a decent command. It didn't give me the number of files. It actually displays the number of files in my current folder, and it manages to display the number of files, which is okay, good. Like I can understand. I'm asking it to write an email explaining why I was late to work, and the problem in this case is having a conversation, resetting it. I think you have to manually reset here, because what it still does is it still goes back to the same question that I asked before, and it tries to print the number of files in my current folder, and it tries to do it in Python, and it tries to use the library OS without importing the library OS in itself. So these are like certain things that you should keep in mind, and it's not a reflection of Open Interpreter. Open Interpreter is of course amazing, but the foundation model that you're using with Open Interpreter defines a lot. The kind of setup that you have on your computer, the kind of dependencies you have sorted out on your computer, the kind of local model that you're using, the kind of compute that you have got, all these things are going to play a tremendously huge role in making Open Interpreter successful. So to sum up, if you want Open Interpreter to be effective, then you need to set up the entire situation for it to be effective so that you can use open interpreter at its best than trying to figure out a lot of other things. And unlike auto gpt, unlike or any other thing, this is directly on your computer, directly on terminal. So the potential to make it work, potential to use it in your advantage is quite amazing, quite huge. But I think it still requires a couple of, let's say, test cases for you to practically use it and then feel how do you use it in effective manner. And I think these are the nuances that we have to figure out. But I think open interpreter is quite amazing. Go through the documentation, learn more. But this video is ideally supposed to be your troubleshooting or installation video. If you have any questions, let me know in the comment section. Otherwise, see you in another video. Happy prompting.